All right, Elon, thank you. Elon Moy in Washington. For more on this, let's bring in our guest, Senator John Barrasso. He is the third-ranking Republican in the Senate. Senator, great to have you with us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
Elon had just reported about how so many Republicans are backing away from the term wall specifically. Have you also, and does that necessarily pave the way for some sort of agreement to be reached?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic as well. I talked to the chairman of the committee last night in terms of getting an agreement that the president will sign, that both sides agreed to. They had the experts in yesterday about border security and focused on the fact that the experts say you need three things. You need manpower, boots on the ground, you need technology, and you need a physical barrier, whatever you want to call it. And not the entire 2,000 miles of the border, but there's specific areas, 10 identified areas where they believe a border barrier of some sort is critical.
Do you think immigration will be separated from this in terms of, for instance, amnesty for DACA? I mean, what was striking in the State of the Union address is that President Trump departed from the script a little bit when he talked about immigration and his desire to see immigrants come into this country, and he ad-libbed in the largest numbers ever. And then he was asked about that afterward and said, did you actually mean that ad-lib remark in the greatest numbers ever? And he said, yes, he wants people to come in legally. Let's make sure we say that legally, because unemployment is so low. We need the workers in this country. So is that a separate discussion at this point?
Well, I think at this point it is. The president, I think, has been very flexible on this, and the offer that he did before reopening the government, talking about these young people who were brought to this country through no fault of their own. That was something that he offered in working to find solutions to secure the border, as well as dealing with these young people and giving them additional opportunities in this country with a legal status, depending on how exactly you wanted to work through that process. So that, I think, is going to be a separate discussion at this point. But I have a lot of confidence in the 17 members of this committee. They're known negotiators. They know how to get a deal done. They're members of the Appropriations Committee, have done this before. They can come up with something, I believe, successfully. And then the other point you made is, will the president sign it? And that's a decision he's going to make. You know, I would say follow Ronald Reagan's approach, which is if you don't get the whole loaf, take it a slice at a time and then go back and get more. The president will have additional opportunities if he doesn't get the full funding money he's asking for now. There's a lot of work that needs to be done at the border to make sure it's secure
Senator,
for our nation.
But I think you're keying in on the central issue. It's very possible that your colleagues and peers could come up with a deal, hand it to the president, and the president could say, I can't do this. And what's the chance that happens, and what do you do if that's the case?
Well, my recommendation is that he accept what they come up with in a bipartisan way and then do the additional commitment that he has talked about. The president is committed to making sure the border is secure. If he has to repurpose other money, there are ways that he can do that. The president has talked about using emergency measures. I would rather he not do it.
Would you support that if that was the case? If he were to look at whatever the senators come back to him with and he says, look, this deal doesn't cover what I want. The only way to get what I want is to declare a national emergency. What would be your position if you were to do that?
Well, number one is I would recommend he sign what is agreed to, because that opens up and commits the funding for the other 7 appropriations bills through the end of the fiscal year. So I think we need to avoid another shutdown. I think nothing good comes from a shutdown at all. I've sponsored legislation to permanently prevent additional shutdowns of the government, and there's a group that want to move in that direction. I'm certainly one of those that's been very involved. I think if the president doesn't get everything he wants, he ought to take everything that is agreed to and then say, all right, I still need additional revenue. And how do we do that? Do they repurpose, as they say, money that's already been approved for other projects and do that? Or does he go the emergency route, which will be challenged? It'll be challenged in the House by Nancy Pelosi. If it passes there, then goes to the Senate and then goes to his desk, where he will likely veto it. And then you get into the issues of veto overrides. That's not the way to go. What we need to do is focus specifically on getting a legislative solution.
Senator, the way you're framing this is largely that the president's kind of got to take whatever is offered to him, or else the fallout will be much worse for him than his opponents. Do you think he is weakened when it comes to negotiating compared to perhaps how he was a couple of months ago? And does that have implications for the other big negotiation going on at the moment, which is with China?
No, I don't think the president is weakened at all. The president has been resolute in what his commitment is. You have a group working together for a legislative solution. In terms of the president dealing in China, overseas activities, I mean, I think the president is very strong in all of those. You see the head of NATO, who was here, and I visited with him last week, say NATO put another $100 billion into funding of defense and military. Why? Because of President Trump's insistence that they do it. So, no, I think the president is showing significant strength overseas.
Hey, Senator, I just wanted to pivot for a second to talk about some of your other colleagues on the left on a different issue, which is, I think you probably saw earlier this week, Senator Schumer and Bernie Sanders coming out with a plan against buybacks. I understood why Bernie Sanders took that position. I was surprised, frankly, to see Senator Schumer take that position, given his own history historically, and wanted to try to understand just psychologically what you think, why you think he's personally taking that position, and what you think that suggests of the party right now.
Well, the Democrat Party has taken a hard left turn. Higher taxes, more regulations. You've seen it with their so-called Green New Deal. You've seen it here, and I think Senator Schumer is seeing that's where the energy and the enthusiasm and motion of the party. It is really a lurch to the left, with Bernie Sanders being so involved in that. But all the presidential candidates, a number of whom are senators, are all heading that way on the Democrat side, and you can kind of go through all of the issues that they've gone through, and I think it hurts our economy. If you think about the State of the Union speech and how strong our economy is in terms of jobs, in terms of the job numbers, in terms of wages, unemployment being way down, and what we've been able to do in terms of energy, and I'm from a big energy state, Wyoming, we have a strong, healthy, growing economy, and it does seem that the Democratic approach is to actually put on the brakes rather than grow the economy.
The reason I ask about Schumer in particular is he was always considered a centrist moderate, if you will, within the party. And I wanted to try to understand whether you look at this and say, is this a cynical ploy on one issue to gain some support from those farther? I mean, what do you think was driving that decision to pursue this? And by the way, I think there's real legitimate questions about buybacks, especially with companies that have underfunded pensions and the like. So I don't want to dismiss the issue outright, but I do think that the approach is interesting, to say the least.
You know, I think Senator Schumer was actually taken back and surprised by the resistance movement as it sprung up after President Trump took the oath of office, the people that were protesting outside of his house in New York. And I think that has driven him to act as the leader, because he said, hey, these are my people. I am their leader. I better get over there further to the left. And I think that is driving all the action and the motion in the Democrat Party right now. The party has taken a hard left turn on, it must be a dozen issues right now, and I think there are things that are going to hurt the economy.
What can you do, though, Senator, to try and swing them more to? I mean, how can you offset? How can the Republican Party offset that? Because it is right now, it is perceived on, among our viewer base as a war on capitalism, not just the wealthy, but on capitalism.
And the polling is suggesting that it's popular, by the way, on both sides, which is the real, which is the other major shift.
Well, there clearly is a division in America right now, and it is driven by a number of factors. But we know that the strong, healthy, growing economy we have in this country is a result of the tax cuts that the Republicans were able to pass, the regulatory relief that came as a result that has allowed for much more opportunity and much more economic growth. So I think we need to continue those things. We're going to continue to talk about this wonderful economic news. We're firing on all the cylinders, and it's really the tax cuts and the regulatory relief that is fueling it, and the left is going further to the left.
Senator, we got to go, but thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. Senator John Barrasso from
Thanks,
Wyoming.
Melissa. Thanks for having me.
Okay, coming up.